and hypothesis in research. Precisely, my emphasis will be for the participant: what is research objective, what is a research question, what is a hypothesis, can there be
Recording
research
in progress.
can there be research question in qualitative and quantitative research? Same true, can there be hypotheses in qualitative and quantitative studies? If that is there, how both of things differ? That will be basic my analysis, right? So to begin with, before talking to what could be the research objective, this is a platform where you can see that statement of the research problem contains the purpose statement, because this is the purpose statement which lead to objective, research questions, and a hypothesis. What is this purpose statement? When I say about this purpose statement, this is precisely the statement of a research problem, and it gives precisely a general direction about the study. Briefly, you can talk about purpose statement shows an overall direction of the study. It is in general. It is not of a specific. Therefore, it becomes very difficult to answer to the purpose statement. Rather, purpose statement in research can be only attained through specific objectives, specific research questions, specific hypotheses. But out of these three, objective, research questions, and hypotheses, they will go together, they will go separately, or I mean say whatever the other way around. Before knowing these things, let me talk about in quantitative and qualitative studies, what does this purpose statement mean? In the quantitative research, purpose statement clearly clarifies the general direction of the study. The same general direction is not possible in case of the qualitative research, because in qualitative research we cannot formalize certain things. Rather, this purpose statement will indicate the intent to explore, understand, and describe the central phenomenon with the participant in a research site. It means the purpose statement in qualitative research will be always contextual, and this contextuality of the purpose statement will depend upon the central phenomena of the qualitative research. The central phenomena could be a process, could be an event. In the process, we can talk about how the curriculum development or curriculum for a particular program has been developed. So it can be a process. It could be an event. Say, for example, what could be the child rearing practices in different tribes or in a specific tribes. So therefore, in qualitative research, the purpose statement will be depending upon the central phenomenon which the researcher has taken up. Following the purpose statement, there will be research objective. Research objective is more specific. They are in conformity with the purpose statement. But look, as it has been talked about, I have clearly stated purpose statement, objective 1 and 2. The purpose statement is only one, but the objective could be multiple. What are those? Say, for example, in a study, when you talk about like the incidence of suicide, if that is a precisely topic, the purpose statement could be to study what led the incident of suicide among the youth. What could be the leading to that, how the incident has occurred, I mean, so the suicide, and that could be possible. There could be many factors which is the purpose of the research. But then objective 1 or 2, even you can proceed to 3. Say for example, objective 1, to examine the relationship between family socioeconomic status and incidence of suicide among youth. Now we have categorically talking about the youth, and we are looking into what could be the possible relationship so far the socioeconomic status of the family is concerned, and it has the relation with the incidence of suicide. Other way around, you can look into objective 2, that family breakup and incidence of suicide. Nature of a family breakup and incidence of occurring the suicide among youth could be the possible objective too. Therefore, when you talk about the purpose statement, precisely it contains a number of objectives. When a purpose of statement is very difficult to attain, being the general, it is giving the general direction. So we look into the objectives, and in the process of through the objective, the researcher aim at attaining what he or she intends to attain. Keeping in the objective in the point of view, it is not the researcher precisely, rather it is the research of the researcher. Coming to next, we talk about, like, when you talk about objective in a study, there can be also different types of objectives. Sometimes there are studies which contain main objectives, like merely talking about the objective, and in certain cases there could be main objectives and auxiliary objectives. These auxiliary objectives become a subsidiary objective, because when, in order to attain the main objective, the auxiliary objective helps the researcher to attain. Say for example, if the main objective is to understand the social interaction social interaction among the different groups of students belonging to different racial, different races. Now the question, if this is the main objective, what could be the auxiliary objectives? Possibly, the auxiliary objective could attain, could aim at what could be the observations tool, whether you, the research tool, whether you can go through the observations or you can go through any other means. So sometimes you give a structure how the interaction had to be carried out. That structuring the social interaction could be possible one of the auxiliary objectives. Say for example, in a quantitative research, we intend to know about the academic achievement relation with the classroom participation. So for this, nature of a classroom participation has to be looked into so far the achievement is concerned. But the researcher is developing a standardized achievement test. Therefore, a standardized development of standardized achievement could be an auxiliary objective of the study, which he may or she may mention in the study. So therefore, in the study, there could be main objective, there could be auxiliary, but auxiliary is not necessary to be a part of the research. Now, what is a research question? A lot of things, a lot of controversies, and people even to differ when we talk about the nature of a research question. In course of time, as we proceed, you will find out how complicated it is really to understand the research questions. And once you put your attention, you can find out there are multiple ways of explaining what a research question, how does a research questions differ from a qualitative and a quantitative research, how does a research questions differ from the hypothesis, and it will be in the process we'll discuss. Now, what does a research question mean? A research question is a question the qualitative research itself tries to answer. So now the question comes. It is in qualitative research. Does it mean there are no research questions in the quantitative research or quantitative studies. When I put these questions, we will answer it in the process of as we progress. So then, to understand the research questions with the research itself tries to answer, the question comes, is it the same as with the data collection questions? A number of issue comes here. That sometimes it is argued that a research question is same as data collection questions. But practically, if you look into it, research questions are different from data collection questions. There can be one research question, and for one research
Professor Chinara, your audio has gone. Pooja, are you there?
Yes, ma'am, I'm here.
Just send him a message on his phone.
Yes, ma'am. I'm
just send him a message fast that he has frozen.
Yes. Hello, sir. The scholars, we have lost connection from Professor Chinara. He is trying to reestablish the connection. Please wait for 5 minutes.
Did you talk to him, Pooja?
Yes, ma'am. I just made a call.
Okay, thank you.
Connect via mobile as well, and
okay.
this is.
Okay, thank you.
Meanwhile, Kheng Somdo, are you here? Scholar named Kheng Somdo, Kheng. Can you hear me? Kheng Somdo, are you here? Are you connected with us? Your name is showing in the participant list.
Yes, madam. Yes.
Kheng, you need to contact us, individually. There is this thing that you have. It might be a scene that you have not filled up the Google form. So kindly register yourself there. Just give me a message in my WhatsApp number, then I'll share you the Google link. Okay?
Madam, I did fill up the form, but my name was Sonam Doji there. But when I joined for the course, for last 3 days, I was in the name of King Sonam Doji. That's why I think that could be the confusion.
What is your real name?
My real name is King, not King Sonam Doji, only Sonam Doji. So I think last 3 days, I didn't change my name to Sonam Doji. That's why you all thought that I'm absent from the session. Yeah.
Show us. Kindly rename your device there.
I did, madam. Now I think it should show Sonam Doji now. Is it showing K?
Yeah, it is. Yeah, it is. See, Somdo, your device shows King Somdo. Please, it's causing us a lot of confusion. You know, with the whole attendance, you know, our data is getting confused because the names are different. So please, it's a request. Your device is showing Keng Somdo. So please just put the name as it is on the Google form. I think we have got in touch with Professor Chinara. Yes, Professor Chinara.
Yeah, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can hear you. Please continue.
Host to disable participant screen sharing.
I have done, sir. I have made you a co-host.
Okay. चलिए एक मिनट Okay, I think I can this I can stop it. Okay, dear participants, can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir. Can you
hear me?
Yes, sir.
I'm extremely sorry because there are some problems here from my end. Okay, so in the process, what I explain is a research question is something in qualitative research itself tries to answer, and it is not as same with the data collection questions, whether through the survey or any kind of thing. Now, research questions, when we talk about objectives have the type, research questions are not considered with the types. They are precisely, there is a hierarchy in the research questions. The hierarchy is like this when you talk about either general questions followed by the specific research questions. General questions, when you talk about, they are the central questions. They are more of abstract in nature. They are more of not observable. But when you talk about specific research, they are research questions, they are more observable. That means through the specific research questions, the researcher really begins and proceed with the work. So here I have talked about what do they mean. In the general research questions are more general, more abstract, usually are not themselves directly answerable. Rather, it is through specific research questions the researcher is able to answer because they are of a more concrete in nature compared to general research questions. Now, the nature of a general research questions, the nature of a specific research questions, I'll be dealing with towards the end after clarifying the hypothesis, after clarifying about what a research question and how does it differ from hypothesis, after clarifying that there can be research questions in qualitative and through quantitative research, again there can be also hypotheses in qualitative quantitative research. So after doing all these things, I'll be able to take you to know what could be a general research questions and what are the specific research questions which research is able to measure. So what does a hypothesis mean? Hypothesis is a statement in quantitative research which appears that hypotheses are not in the qualitative research, but they are. How they are? How do they operate? Again, I'm talking about later on. A hypothesis is a statement in quantitative research in which investigator makes prediction or a conjecture about the outcomes of the relationship or differences among attributes and characteristics. These attributes and characteristics precisely name as the variables which are measurable. The variables can be independent variable, it can be dependent variable. So I am not going to extent of explaining the variables in the research, but what I wanted to tell you that when you talk about the hypothesis, they are precisely making the prediction or conjecture, establishing the relationship among the attributes or the characteristics, or they intend to find out the difference, if any, among the attributes or characteristics. Now, like the research questions, hypotheses are means to narrow a purpose statement into specific prediction. When we talk about research questions, normally narrow down the purpose statement in terms of a specific research questions. But here, the hypothesis convert, transform, change the purpose statement into specific prediction, establishing the specific relationship, specific difference among the attributes and characteristics, the attributes and or characteristics. Now, the attributes, when you talk about what could be those attributes, they are related to the individuals. Say, for example, in the context of the students, those attributes could be the like the achievement, could be the intelligence, could be the like extroversion as a trait, it could be achievement and motivation, it could be something of this in nature. So now, next is the prediction are not simple. When you talk about the hypothesis, you are making specific prediction, precisely stating the characteristics or the attributes. These predictions are normally argued that they are the educated guesses or the hunches, but they are not exactly. Even you talk about educated guesses or hunches, they are not evidence free. They are based on the evidence the researcher collect from the past research or the past literature. Normally, in the thesis work, what do the students do? They develop the hypothesis. They formulate the hypothesis. But when you look into explaining why such a hypothesis have been used, you will find out in the majority of the research thesis, those explanation of formulating using a specific hypothesis in the context of a past research and literature are missing. Therefore, there at that point of time, we talk about hypothesis or prediction as educated guesses, but they are free from the evidences of the past research and literature. Now, do the qualitative studies not contain the hypothesis? My question is still to be answered in the, coming up slides. When you talk about hypothesis, like objective we talk about, there could be the main objective and auxiliary objective. Unlike the research questions, we are hierarchical in nature. In hypothesis, we can make them as directional and non-directional hypothesis. Directional hypothesis precisely give a straight direction about the connectivity or relationship among the variables, among between between the groups relating to particular attribute. It may be so happen that in the directional hypothesis, say for example, as the researcher participation in laboratory increases, there will be increasing understanding so far the theory of a theory behind a particular laboratory work is concerned. So what happens? The more will be the interaction in the laboratory, the more will be activity based in the laboratory, the more will be the understanding of the theory behind the specific laboratory. If this happens, the hypothesis, we can say this is directional hypothesis. Or in other words, increasing the classroom participation resulting in higher achievement of the students. So this is directional. What could be the non-directional hypothesis? So in the non-directional hypothesis, which normally stated in the form of null hypothesis. That means, despite the level of a classroom participation, the achievement proficiency of the learners remains the same. That means there is no direction. Whether achievement will be increasing with increasing participation or it will be decreasing with decreasing participation, it is not clear. We talk about achievement proficiency remains the same irrespective of the level of participation of the students. So this what you call about a non-directional hypothesis. Now, are research questions same as a hypothesis? Here I have compared between what could be a research question and how does it differ from the hypothesis. Number one, with respect to the nature. Research questions begin with general questions and they are not fixed. At no point of time, research questions are fixed. And when you say research questions are not fixed, they are contextual. That depends upon the research setting where the researcher is engaged in. And this is quite true precisely in case of the qualitative research. I am coming next, that research question in qualitative and quantitative research are true. So while compare the research questions with the hypothesis, it may be said that the research questions precisely begin with the general questions and not fixed, whereas the hypothesis usually specific, measurable, fixed, and unchangeable, which is not true in case of the research question. Second, research questions generate specific research questions. General research questions are more abstract in nature. Specific research questions are more concrete in nature and they are answerable. One can observe and you can find out to give a reply to the specific research questions. With respect to that, in case of hypothesis, hypotheses show the specific prediction of the study. Third, related to activity. Research questions generally, what happens? Generation is a continuous activity throughout. At no point of time, unless a researcher reach at a point, research questions will go on emerging in the qualitative research. Data analysis, data collection, and we can talk about the research questions, they continue. At any point of time, there will be any doubt, the researcher further generate a specific research questions depending upon the data what he or she has collected, and basing upon the data collected, how he is going to look into, interpret it. In case of any doubt, further research questions could be asked by the researcher needing further investigation are going to the field. Whereas in case of hypothesis, formulation of the hypothesis is a one-time activity. So therefore, in this context, you can say that formulations or generating the research question is not a one-time activity. It is a multiple-time activity. Researcher will go on developing the research questions until the researcher has arrived at a point of saturation. Saturation means what? The researcher is able to get from the field similar type of data. Therefore, further query, further data is not required. So therefore, what you can talk about the formulations of the generation of the research questions is a continuous activity, continue throughout until the researcher reach at a saturation point. The research approach predominantly used in qualitative research. It is normally viewed, perceived not only by the novice, those who are the PhD students, like dear students who are the participants, that research questions are precisely confined to qualitative research and hypotheses are precisely confined to quantitative research. Yes, hypotheses are confined to quantitative research, but one cannot say that there will be no hypothesis in qualitative research. Similarly, Though the research questions predominate in the qualitative research, one cannot say there can be no research case in quantitative research. But dominance of one thing is common. That is research questions in qualitative study, hypothesis in quantitative study. Now coming to what happens that when you look into the research, objective research questions and hypotheses are there. But what role do they play? At the end, I have put a certain questions you will come across in the last slide. But there is some common element which is being shared by objective research questions and hypotheses. What are those? Number one, objective research questions and hypotheses follow the purpose statement. It is the purpose statement of the research that generate the objective research questions and hypotheses. And they are means of narrowing, focusing in the study. The researcher focus on the study basing upon formulation of the objective, generation of the research questions, formulations of a hypothesis. And as a result of which, what happens? The general direction which the research purpose statement reveals or state, that become more operationalized. That means purpose statement never operationalize the research, rather it is the research question, the hypothesis, the objectives of the study which make the research more operational compared to the purpose statement. Second point, all these three give direction to the research problem. Third, they keep the researcher focused during the study. Fourth, they point to the data required. What data required, it depends upon the objective, research questions or hypothesis. Now, fourth one, I mean the last one, they provide a framework to write a research report. The researcher concentrated upon these objective research questions or an hypothesis, and he start writing the report of the research or the study which he has conducted. Now coming to, can there be research questions in a quantitative study? It means we talk about it is the research questions predominant in a qualitative study, but can there be research questions in quantitative studies? My answer is two. There can be research questions, but the nature of research questions in qualitative and quantitative research, they differ. How? Number one, research questions relate to attributes or characteristics of the individual or organization in quantitative research. These attributes are precisely, or characteristics are precisely labeled, named as the variables in the study, that is the quantitative studies. Whereas research questions primarily revolve around the central phenomena being studied. What is the central phenomena? Is it a process or event or anything? Or it is like a culture? You talk about event occurring, like what I talk about social interaction. I talk about like the racial, like you can say social interaction in the classroom with the multi students belonging to multi-ethnic group, or central phenomena could be life of the students in like in a specific co-educational institutions or in the hostel life. So central life could be a process or event, and that revolve around that. Second, research questions or hypotheses are used in quantitative research. Research questions used, but hypotheses are usually not used in the qualitative research. Now, I've repeated these things. Third point, research questions are usually fixed in the beginning and do not change during the study. If you have any research questions in the quantitative study, you never get in change. We normally able to respond it. And in case of a qualitative study, is not. Now, in case of research questions which are fixed and unchangeable in the quantitative research, questions sometimes come. But sometimes in the absence of the evidence in the past research and the literature, the researcher is not able to formulate the hypothesis. In that case, hypotheses are replaced with the research questions, and in the contest, research questions remain fixed and unchangeable. It is not that it cannot be changed at no point of time, but there can be some minor changes, but these minor changes may occur, which is not that substantial, which you can claim that the research question in the quantitative research is changeable. Fourth point, research questions are developed before identifying the method and the procedure of the study. Whether research questions in case of a qualitative research emerge with the ongoing process. Now, when you talk about a quantitative study, before proceeding to the method of a research questions are developed. But what happens in the qualitative research? As the researcher keep on collecting the data, analyzing the data, there is a possibility of emerging new research questions, deleting the old research questions, and carrying on the research. This is what you find about the research questions in the qualitative research and quantitative research. Now coming to next question, next is you can say research questions are ensured with the formal data collection tools, whereas research questions begin with specific research questions, which subsequently lead to a series of hypotheses or a theory building. So when the research question in a qualitative research may lead to a theory in a quantitative research, we do not talk about the theory developing, rather we talk about the theory testing. In the process of research, replying to the answer, we try to test the existing theory in the context of the research questions have been developed. Now, therefore, we say in the quantitative research, research questions are explanation oriented, whereas in qualitative research questions are explanation in nature. And if you look into the whole thing, you will find out in the quantitative research questions follow the deductive, whereas in case of the qualitative, it follows the inductive. I think I have given a diagram you can see it into. Research questions across a research study, irrespective of the qualitative and quantitative research, how does the process of inquiry begins with the research questions or start with the research questions. Look in the left-hand side, we have the quantitative research, follow the deductive method, begin from specific research to general research. Whereas in case of a qualitative research, sorry, I may be corrected, dear students, when you look into the quantitative research, it follow the deductive reasoning, deductive process or deductive logical reasoning. We begin with the general research questions and we proceed with the specific. Whereas in case of a qualitative research, we begin with the specific research question, lead it to a number of general research questions which the researcher may end at, leading to a number of hypotheses which the researcher may arrive at, leading to developing the theory. If it has been possible on the part of the research, even specific research can lead it to a development of a theory. Therefore, in quantitative research, it is deductive, and qualitative research, it is inductive process as displayed to the diagram. Now, coming to example, here I have given the general research questions and specific research questions, which I started with, that we have the objective, which can be types. We can have the hypothesis, it has its own type. But look, dear friends, in case of the research questions, there can be no types. Rather, we talk about research questions in hierarchy. So, in the context of incidents of suicide, now I have talked about general research questions and specific research questions. What could be the general research question one? What is the relationship between family background factors and the incidence of youth suicide? Specific research questions, there is one general research questions, and I have developed only two specific research questions. There could be a number more also. What is the relationship between family income and the incidence of youth suicide? What is the relationship between parental breakup and the incidence of youth suicide? So therefore, general research questions contain multiple specific research questions. These research questions are more concrete in nature, observable, measurable, as stated earlier. Coming to next general research question 2 in the context of incidence of suicide. General research question could be, what is the relationship between school experiences factors and the incidence of youth suicide? And when you talk about what is the relationship between school experiences factor and the incidence of youth suicide, we have the specific research questions. This I have left for the participants, they can answer or they can interact with me at present also. Anybody can have the interaction. If in case of the incidence of suicide among youth, if the general research question, what is the relationship between school experience factors and incidence of youth suicide, what could be the specific research questions? Yes. Hello. Okay, I am proceeding to the next without waiting further. Can there be hypothesis in qualitative studies? Now, normally, quantitative study, they claim that hypotheses are their property. These properties cannot be shared, cannot be shared in the qualitative research, but it is absolutely wrong. There can be hypothesis in also qualitative research, but then qualitative research, the nature of the hypothesis are different. Different. Say for example, a historical research, it can be also research hypothesis. It can have the hypothesis, but the form of hypothesis, nature of the hypothesis, they are different. How they are different, I have explained in this in the slide shown to you. Number one, quantitative and qualitative. Hypotheses are typically identified at the beginning of a research study and prior to data collection in case of a quantitative. So we have the evidence of research and literature. We put the researcher put his or her insight and experiences and formulate the hypothesis. And once these hypotheses are formulated, we are not going to change as earlier stated, and this happens prior to data collection. Rather, I will tell it is not prior to data collection, it happens formulations and fixed before you start with the methodology of the research of the particular research problem. Now, in a qualitative study, there may not be any tentative or general hypothesis at the beginning of a research study. In the beginning of qualitative research study, there may not be any hypothesis at the beginning. In qualitative research, what happens? Say, for example, when the qualitative research study, we may not have the hypothesis. Normally, you don't have the hypothesis. But how does a researcher begin with? A researcher begins with the foreshadowed problems. What is this foreshadowed problem? The foreshadowed problem precisely is a setting where the researcher presumes with whom he or she will interact. And in the process of selecting the participant to whom he will interact, on the basis of that interaction made, the hypothesis can emerge out of that. So unlike in the quantitative study, when a hypothesis are emerging, they have their based on the previous established theories. Here there is no such established theories. Here what is there? Here, how does the researcher interact, the nature of interaction, the theme of the interaction with the participant in the site, that will determine, help the researcher to generate certain hypothesis. But it is not, it is not a must. It is an option. It is an option in the sense depending upon the research problem. Second point, hypotheses are usually fixed. If at all modified, such modification is minimal. I think I have told about this earlier. We can have the hypothesis, We normally take it for granted they are fixed. But however, there is a possibility of changing and there can be a slight modification. And in case of the qualitative study, hypotheses are added, deleted, modified, refined along with the data collection and the data analysis. It means hypotheses are not fixed. Once you can hypothesis, the same hypothesis like general research question generate the specific research questions. One specific research questions generate the other research, I mean specific research questions. So also hypothesis in qualitative research could generate the other hypothesis. I am giving one example in the context of the social interaction among the students in multi-ethnic classroom. So you think about the multi-ethnic classroom, there is a presence of the students, there has been a social interaction. My hypothesis is that social interaction increases among the students in the multi-ethnic classroom as they become older. So naturally, it is a possibility is there. The interaction among the students belonging to multi-ethnic group, the more days they will spend together in the classroom, there is a possibility of increasing the social interaction. Fine, but the researcher has entered into the classroom. He has observed or she has observed what kind of nature of interaction he has found or she has found. It may so happen that the interaction the researcher could observe in the classroom might have resulted, yes, there has been social interaction increase among the students across a sex belonging to two race, not the remaining race. So there is a possibility. This is the second hypothesis. So what happens to the others? I mean, say the boys and the girls belonging to the remaining two ethnic groups or four ethnic groups or five ethnic groups. So this is subjected to further observation and in the field. So therefore, hypothesis can be added, deleted and modified so far as the qualitative research is concerned. Now coming to third point, hypotheses are directional or non-directional, which I have told earlier. But here, hypotheses are conjecture. Their wording fits to the context of the phenomenon under study. We never deviate. It could be a conjecture. The conjecture is always context specific, not a context free, as in case of the quantitative research. This is what you talk about. Hypothesis could be true in qualitative research. Now, dear students, for reflection, I have given two questions. Can a study contain both research questions or hypotheses? Or the study has to go along with only research questions or hypotheses? Next, is it inevitable to formulate objectives of a study when it already contains research questions and hypotheses? What I mean to say here, the study may have the research questions and hypotheses. Is there any need or necessity to have objectives in the study? These are the two questions which I put forward before the participants. So, Dr. Pooja, can you hear me? Hello?
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me?
Yes, sir.
So this is where I have ended my, delivery of the lectures to the participants. Now, if they have any questions, they can go ahead with, and I will look into, or I have given the reflection. Fine.
Yes, sir. Scholars, we are opening the session for your questions and queries. Kindly make questions addressed to Dr. Chinara, Professor Chinara.
Sir, can I ask, can I answer your question at the question we have raised in the end of the session? I'm Harendra Sharma. Hello.
Hello.
Yes, sir, in the end of the session, you have raised these two questions.
Yes.
And like you said that it is, like open for the participant to answer. So can I answer this question?
Yes,
the second question.
exactly. That I wanted to know from you.
Yeah, sir. In the first, what I believe is that we can have both research question and hypothesis in the same study. Okay, and the second, because research question is where we, we start our research, and hypothesis is where we, just assume that this could be the analysis or result of or outcome of the research. Okay, so we should have both the
Hello. What happened?
question and hypothesis in the same study. The second, with which objective means the research, the your objective should also be there in the research, even if we have research question and hypothesis.
So it
Thank
is
you,
what
sir.
you, right. So you could say that there can be research questions and they go along with the hypothesis. But my question is
Yes, sir.
again, my question further is that if you go for the research questions and hypothesis together, is it that research questions or hypotheses are supportive to each other or they are completely independent?
So they are not completely independent. They are interconnected.
Pardon me?
Sir, I am saying that both research question and hypothesis are interconnected. They cannot be go in a different direction.
No, my point that if they cannot go in a different direction, then why do you question research questions and hypotheses? If they are in the same direction, if the nature of the hypothesis is same as the nature of the research questions, then why do you go for framing it? If the research questions
But
and
sir, in the
hypothesis are, please.
sir, in the hypothesis, we are, we are assuming that this could be the result. Okay, so we are giving null hypothesis. That means it is not a directional in that case. So that could be one variable, that the independent variable may have effect on the dependent variable or may not have the effect on the dependent variable. Whereas in the research, when we are asking that, is there any effect of the independent variable on the dependent variable?
So my question, right, I could follow it, but if that is, can there be a situation where research questions can supplement to hypothesis?
Yes, sir.
Can you
question can supplement? Yes, sir. This can be.
Instead of being independent, rather it can supplement to the hypothesis which you have, I mean, say, tested in the quantitative research.
Yes, sir. Yes,
for example, yes, give an example.
Sir, right now I am not getting any example of that, but
fine. Anybody?
But I think research question and hypothesis both should be in the same thing. I think that there should be a research question and hypothesis both in the the same. That can be both in the same research.
Okay, fine. So there are certain theses we come across in different discipline we are talking about. There are certain discipline, even they don't talk about the objective. They, I mean, say, frame the research questions and the hypothesis and they complete their study. Is there a necessity when we talk about it is the objectives or research questions and hypothesis, they are the means of narrowing down the purpose statement. If they play the such role, what is the requirement to have objectives and research questions and a hypothesis together? Can we do without the objectives? That is my question. You told yes. Can you say why it is yes or how it is yes? What is your argument?
Sir, I am saying that objective should be there, in the research, because objective gives us the direction where we want to do the research.
Sir,
research that is what
yes.
Sir, may I answer this question?
Yes, please help me out.
Okay. Sir, research objectives is the purpose of particular research. If we are not aware the aims and objective about the particular research, how can we go further? So that's why research objectives is necessary or mandatory for the particular research.
Okay. So you talk
Sir,
about.
can I say something more?
Yeah, please tell me.
Sir, in my opinion, maybe it's not true, but I think, sir, in the beginning, for the starting of conducting a research, I think the questions make the goal. When we are living in an environment, in a community, in a city, wherever, sir, there are some questions coming in our minds. Then after that, after the questions, we are supposed to go for the answers. Okay. But after the questions, we should have the hypothesis. So we think that, yeah, this is the question, maybe because of this. So we make our hypothesis. And finally, I think the objective will be in the last part, sir. Then after that, the objective will be cleared after we make the questions, clear the questions. And after the questions, we make our hypothesis. And then after that, the objectives will be cleared for us.
Okay, what I mean to say, what you precisely stated, that in a research, there could be certain questions arising in the mind, coming up in the mind. That is precisely we talk about the emerging question in the mind, which keeps on like making the researcher to think for, I'm saying think and think. And on the basis of that, we talk about the objectives and how the hypothesis can be formulated. So fine. So we can have, whether it is objective research questions or a hypothesis, it is not universally acceptable that all three things will be there. But however, objectives as a component of the researcher or the research or the study, it has to be there. It shows what exactly the researcher is intending. This is what I mean. I am giving a response to you all. And in the process, in order to attain the objectives, we formulate the hypothesis, which will be able to tell us, or it makes the objective more operationalized. Dear students, did you understand what I intend to say to you?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
We frame the objectives, just like you have the purpose statement in the research, and thereby we go to formulate a specific objective. In the similar fashion, once we go for the specific objective, we aim at what could be the possible questions to, attain the objectives, or what could be the possible hypothesis. Depending upon the nature of the research, we formulate the hypothesis. Okay, any other questions? Any other questions? I think 2, 3, good.
Sir, how can we differentiate between hypothesis clearly and the objective, sir? Is there some connection between them? Similarities, I mean?
Yeah. Objective and hypothesis, objective and hypothesis cannot be independent. They are depending upon each other. Say for example, in one of the objective, we say that should I say in quantitative research or in qualitative research? Hello, dear students.
Qualitative, sir.
I think if I talk qualitative or quantitative, I think quantitative, it will be much clear, and we can proceed further to talk about in qualitative research. Say in the quantitative research we talk about, say in the quantitative research we develop the hypothesis, or maybe the nature of the, you think of the nature of the research, whether it is qualitative and quantitative. I am framing one objective: to examine or to study the relationship between classroom participation and science achievement among, say, high school students. So we talk about the objective to study or to examine, is there any relationship with the classroom participation of the students and their achievement? Now, what could be the hypothesis? Now, in order to formulate the hypothesis, you cannot formulate the hypothesis just as a guess, just by applying your rationality, but studying the literature and the research which have been carried out in the context of achievement so far as the what you call about the classroom participation is concerned. So your background, your base will be, your foundation will be the evidences what you are getting in the literature. And on the basis of evidence, you may state the hypothesis right. What will be the hypothesis? Achievement of the high school students remains same irrespective of level of classroom participation. Whatever the level of a classroom participation, achievement will remain the same. This is a kind of a null hypothesis. Dear students, did you follow it?
Yes,
sir. Thank you so much.
Okay. Any other question? Okay, Dr. Pooja.
Yes, sir.